Yeah.
Like we are the same race as the mainland Chinese.
For sure, yeah.
We do the same things. We read the same things.
We eat the same food.
We eat the same food. And so we are Chinese, but we never say that we are, like, I would never say I identify as Chinese. I identify as a Hong Konger.
Yeah.
And that's what people in the West had a really hard time understanding. This is not a science, right? Like, you can't say, oh, we can define water because it boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Like, there's no such thing for a Hong Konger.
Hi guys, welcome to episode 2 of the podcast. And today we decided to talk a little bit something that's a little bit more personal to both of us. So overarching Hong Kong culture and Hong Kong culture in general, and we would like to talk about how Hong Kong culture is slowly depleting under the kind of wraths of the Communist Party. But I don't want to say the wraths of the Communist Party, but we kind of wanted to give an insight to people that are outside of Hong Kong, what it's like to live as a Hong Konger in Hong Kong, and also to a certain extent what it's like for your home to be somewhat taken away. Like, all the buildings are there, but the culture is slowly but surely changing. And I feel like, and one of the things that Isaac really wanted to do, but was to present a poem, because it really kind of encapsulates what living as a Hong Konger is like.
Exactly. So I'll just kick off. It's called Inner City by a Polish poet called Zbigniew Herbert. I apologize if I got the first name wrong, but here we go. In an eastern city where I won't return, there is a winged stone, light and huge. Lightning strikes this winged stone. I close my eyes to remember in my city where I won't return. There is heavy and nourishing water. The one who gives you a cup of this water gives you the faith you will still return. In my far away city that is gone from all maps of the world, there is bread that can nourish. Throughout life, black as the faith you will see again. Stone, bread, water, and the presence of towers at dawn. Herbert was a Polish poet who lived during the time of the Soviet Union, and he was regarded as one of the key figures of the Polish literary opposition to the Soviet Union, and he was very much against what he saw as the diminishing of Polish culture. And that's why I wanted to tie it back into Hong Kong, because that is what we both feel is happening to us, just as it happened to Poland so many years ago.
Yeah. And for those people who don't really brush up in the history, like, Poland was actually part of the Iron Wall, and just like
Curtain.
Curtain, sorry, curtain. Yeah. My bad. Line curtain, and like countries like Lithuania, Estonia, Belarus, and Ukraine,
Poland, Ukraine, yeah,
and all those countries.
Latvia.
Yeah. For the majority of the time, like until 1991, most of Eastern Europe was basically covered by the Soviets.
Which was Russian dominated.
And that's why, to be fair, Eastern European countries aren't doing as well as compared to Western European countries who have been developing their own system, because these countries are relatively new, right? And so,
but Poland's always had a long history of resisting subjugation by the Russians,
exactly,
and being subjugated.
Exactly, like they've always been, Poland's always been a country that's always been fucked over,
and slowly, and slowly but surely, Hong Kong is becoming the new Poland of sorts. People always like to say, oh, it's like West Berlin, but really it's starting to become like Poland, where you see our distinct cultural identity kind of eroded day after day after day. And that's what I really wanted to talk about what it means to be a Hong Konger. So we were ruled by the British for I think 100 years, right, until 1997 or something like that.
Well, we ruled in Opium Wars.
So the Opium,
99 years.
So the Opium Wars, Britain destroyed China, Imperial China, because it was not communist at the time. They managed to get Hong Kong, and then they got the new territories as an extra later on, and they basically promised to hand it back to communist China in 1997.
Yeah,
and we were both born after 1997.
Well, 2001. Well, with the promise of maintaining our way of life for the next 50 years. apparently that's not very true anymore. That doesn't seem
Let's talk about that.
exactly that doesn't really happen anymore. Like I feel like after 1997, you can clearly tell going into the 21st century. I mean, reading up about history,
Things
and
are
stuff,
changing.
like things are suddenly changing. The subversion laws in 2003, the subversion protests bringing up like 500,000 people in the streets. That was a big event.
Yeah.
And then
And then you've got intermittent protests throughout. We've got 2014.
I mean, every year there's been a protest.
But 2019 was the big year.
I would say 2014 first, and then 2019.
Yeah,
it goes in stages,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Because 2014 was a big step because it was Occupy Central, the Umbrella Revolution.
So for those of you Western audiences who might not be as up to speed, Occupy Central was basically Hong Kong's answer to Occupy Wall Street, but instead of asking for no bailouts, we were asking for democracy.
Yeah.
And students, but also ordinary citizens from all walks of life blockaded a massive stretch of, I think, Harcourt Road in Admiralty, which is like the financial district, and Mong Kok, which is a more residential district. And they blockaded it for like 70-something days.
70 days.
Crazy.
Like it was similar. I could compare this almost to the Tiananmen Square protests.
Yeah, Tiananmen Square.
In the idea that these kids these protesters, including someone you know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're
right.
It's just personal to us because we were kids at the time, but we sort of knew what was
exactly.
Was going
well,
on.
they were like they stood in they slept in tents.
Yeah.
And this is a similar tactic that they used in Tiananmen Square.
And it was super peaceful. Like I can't
peaceful.
I can't emphasize how
playing
peaceful.
music.
They were the protesters in 2014. The students set up tents to revise for their exams, even as they were blockading the road.
Yeah.
Like,
and the thing is, like, the music back then was cheerful.
Yeah.
It was like
really cheerful.
It was like canto pop. It was super like high energy. It was really trendy at the time.
Optimistic.
Exactly. Optimistic. Like optimistic.
Change was in the air.
Optimistic that the government will actually do something in favor of the people.
And to be fair, that is what happened at the beginning stages of 2019, which is what our Western audiences will know a bit better because of all the news coverage. So there's an extradition bill. A lot of complicated politics, but basically 1 million and then 2 million people took to the street. There's 7 million people in Hong Kong, and 2 million of them were on the street, protesting for democracy.
Which is basically way more than a fourth.
And then the government responded on, I think, the 12th of June 2019 by blasting protesters with tear gas at an unprecedented amount. And then things escalated and escalated and escalated.
Yeah, and there's also the whole situation with mafias and all that kind of other stuff.
Yeah, so there was but let's draw back to Hong Kong culture. We can talk about protests later.
Yeah.
But
I don't see protests as like something that we should like talk about so much because it's not really the point. Like we're not here
culture.
to
we can talk about culture and what it means.
Like for me, like if you want to read up the events, read up the events. We're here to talk about like what we actually feel and like how all of this.
Yeah, that was just background.
Exactly, right. That was just background. So,
and the reason why I was interested in this was that we both went to international school, right? And there's no strong sense of I am a Hong Konger at international school.
Yeah.
It's just
no one gives a shit.
It's almost like, oh, I speak English and all these plebs, they speak Chinese and I'm so much better than them. And the only moment when I actually felt I was from Hong Kong was when I left Hong Kong for boarding school. I don't know if it's the same for you. When did you feel that you were, I am a Hong Konger? When did you feel that strong sense of identity?
For me, I feel like even when I was in New York, like I was a proud Hong Konger. But it's when you anything like is with comparison, right? Like when you step into like the real time when I felt really like a Hong Konger, and I wouldn't say like I go to a different country and I'm like, oh, I feel like a Hong Konger, like more. I feel like I was more of a Hong Konger when I was protesting in a march in New York.
Oh,
when Nathan Law came into NYU to discuss a talk, and there was like a gazillion amount of mainlanders just standing there
screaming communist slogans,
and then
kill all the rioters.
The worst part about this entire thing, right, was the SCMP reported us as like
troublemaking.
No, not troublemaking.
No,
we're just like just peaceful protesters. Nothing really happened. Reported it as it really is, and I still feel like SAP is still somewhat biased towards China because they're run by Alibaba.
Yeah.
But when you look at CGTN and what they reported, right, they called us radicals.
So CGTN is the propaganda arm of Communist
or
China.
like the global, what was it called, the Global Times.
Yeah, CGTN, the Global Times. So if any of you see the media,
yeah, the Global Times is such a twat name. Like fucking hell, it sounds so Western. Like, but do not be fooled. The Global Times is a Chinese publication.
I think it's quite obvious. I wouldn't insult our viewers. I think as soon as they click, you'll know. As soon as they click.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Global Times sounds like a massive fraud.
But like, let's move away from politics back to the culture because that's what we're trying to talk about. And people always ask me, "Oh, so where are you from?" Right? That's a very dangerous question. I will say, "Oh, I'm from Hong Kong." So where is Hong Kong?
You see, we never say like Hong Kong, China.
No,
you know how we just say like Shanghai, China, or like Beijing, China.
No, we stop at Hong Kong. We never say, "Oh, I'm from the Hong Kong SAR, China." No, we say, "I'm from Hong Kong," and they say, "Oh, so where's that?" And I'm like, "Okay, so it's in China." So you're basically Chinese then? And then the answer is, well, yes and no, because ethnically we are Chinese, right? No denying that we are Han Chinese.
Yeah.
We're influenced by Chinese culture.
As much as I don't like to say it.
Exactly, but we are Han Chinese.
Yeah.
Like we are the same race as the mainland Chinese.
For sure, yeah.
We do the same things, we read the same things.
We eat the same food.
We eat the same food. And so we are Chinese, but we never say that we are, like, I would never say I identify as Chinese. I identify as a Hong Konger.
Yeah.
And that's what people in the West had a really hard time understanding. And one of my friends, he was basically ribbing me about it. And he was like, "Oh, so Hong Kong's kind of part of China, but not really. So you're China's bitch then, right?" And then I got really angry. And then we got in a bit of a fight. But looking back, although he meant it in a kind of malicious way, it's true factually though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Factually.
well, it is true on like a political level that we are Chinese bitch. And economically, we are also China's bitch. In the sense where 80% of our imports come from China.
Yeah, and we rely on China so much, but that's why it's so hard trying to define what it means to be a Hong Konger, because you know it's different. Even
you can feel that it's different.
Feel like my mainland
Culturally
friends describe it as they say when they cross the border into Hong Kong, it feels like a different country, completely free, completely like chaotic, crazy. Whereas in China, it's very regimented, and that's why I always say to people like there is no set sign. This is not a science, right? Like, you can't say, "Oh, we can define water because it boils at 100 degrees Celsius." It's like, there's no such thing for a Hong Konger. Like, Hong Kongers, like, what does it mean? It means walking by Victoria Harbour and looking at the view. It means enjoying, like, wonton soup with your friends, like, chatting shit in Cantonese, right?
Yeah, but for me, like, even that is not what being a Hong Konger is. Like you can have wonton soup in fucking Shenzhen.
Exactly.
Like, we're in Guangdong, which is, like, a Cantonese region, and we speak a language called Cantonese, and we come from a region of Canton, and which essentially all do the same things.
We do the same, but it's so different.
But what makes it so unique? It's because of our English like influence, our fusion, and the fact that we've developed some like a culture that is completely unique from the rest of China.
What would you say to the idea that I hear a lot that Hong Kong identity is merely a way for us to express our arrogance, like our cultural superiority.
Oh, like the fact that we're
over the
special
mainland.
and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I really disagree with that. I don't know about you, but I don't think...
My thing is like, okay, you know, you look at like Hong Kong and you compare it to Macau. Do you really think Macanese culture is a massive thing?
No, it's just casinos, isn't it?
Exactly,
Casinos.
but why is Macanese culture so... Why have we differed so much in terms of culture living under the British compared to the Macanese living under the Portuguese? Like that's my distinction, right? Why over like the same amount of time that we've been colonized, we have developed a rapidly different culture. We have also developed a lot of, like a financial sector that is very Western. Whereas
our manners are very Western.
Our manners are extremely Western. The way we dress is extremely Western compared to everywhere else. Our attitude is completely like different, like to Western. Like
it's much more Western.
It's much more Western.
Completely Western.
It's much more Western. Our political system is more Western.
Well, it was.
It was more Western, And then you look at the Macanese and you're like,
they're basically
what happened to you, mate? Like
I
nothing
think
happened.
I think
Nothing happened to you.
one big reason, which is often overlooked, is that Hong Kong is much larger than Macau. So we've got that we have the ability to create that self-sustaining cycle.
And I wouldn't even say it's just like we're larger than Macau. It's just like we were also more successful than Macau.
Yeah,
to a certain degree.
To a certain degree, in terms of projecting influence abroad.
Yeah.
But the reason why I started off with that poem is that both of us feel that Hong Kong culture, as it exists, is rapidly disappearing.
Yeah.
Do you think that Hong Kong will remain? Do you think we'll still call Hong Kong as Hong Kong with all the connotations behind it?
I mean, when we have kids, I don't think we'll call it. We can call it home.
No.
Like I wouldn't like for me like when I grow up to have children, which I mean I don't think that's.
We don't know about that.
We don't know about that yet. Nah. We'll see. Like I wouldn't want to bring them to Hong Kong because I wouldn't want them to like grow up in Hong Kong because it's just like imagine if they had this association with home.
Yeah.
And then it's being like taken away
different.
further and further and further and further.
And it's so bizarre. It's so crazy because Hong Kong isn't changing physically. It's still the same mountains, the same sky, the same rivers, the same buildings.
Shit.
We do the same shit.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like the spirit is slowly draining away. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I know it sounds like crazy. It sounds crazy, but the vitality of the place, like what made it special, what made it unique.
Yeah, look, in the 1980s, there's this massive sense of optimism. Like, look at cinema in the 1980s in Hong Kong.
Yeah. Like Hong Kong cinema.
We were freaking booming, mate.
We were kicking ass. We were kicking ass,
like physically as well.
If you watch movies like The Matrix, for example, all of their fight sequences come from Hong Kong. I swear they got their stunt coordinator was from Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly.
On The Matrix. That was how. So Hong Kong wasn't just, we're richer than the mainland, we're so much better. Like, no, we've also got this really unique culture which comes from our own creative endeavors, our cultural endeavors.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so important to just acknowledge the fact that these are so unique to us. Like, we're so prideful because, I wouldn't say we, because we're just Hong Kongers, but like, Hong Kongers of the past are really prideful in the fact that they've built this by themselves. And with obviously under the sort of tutelage, if you can say,
of the British.
Of the British.
And let's just be clear. Like, we're not saying that Hong Kong should be a colony again. Absolutely not, because the British had so many problems.
Like every single opportunity that we had to expand, London took it.
Yeah. Right. And so we're not saying I don't want to set up Britain as this perfect savior, because it's not. It was racist. It was corrupt.
Like until 1960, there was a massive issue with racism in Hong Kong, where it was similar to like apartheid.
I mean, not all the white people, all the Guilos, they lived on the peak, and then they've got Hong Kong like Chinese servants.
What was that, like Hollywood Road that divided?
Exactly. And then all the plebs, all the dirty Chinese people like us, had to live in like shanty towns. But even with all of that oppression, even with all that political inequality, we still thrived because we were given the opportunity to fight for a better life, I would say.
For sure. And that comes with some level of integration.
Mm-hmm.
And after the leftist protests in 1967, and the kind of the downfall of the Chinese, what was it called, the 5-year plans and industrialization.
China realized they needed capitalism. And that's why they started out being
and that's why Hong Kong was so successful in the 1970s in building their economy, because we were just so focused on like we understood what was the correct way, right? We saw millions of people starving in mainland China, and we were just like, you know what, it's fine, like we're happy with what we have, right? And we just
but we helped out China a lot, right? We gave, I say we because we weren't alive, but Hong Kong injected so much money into China, and that's why. I was reading this comic, right? There's this comic, and it compared Hong Kong to like the first wife of China. So when China was poor, like Hong Kong as like the dutiful kind of like wife helped up China, like lent China money, like supported China, and as soon as China got big and powerful, and then suddenly they started abusing, Hong Kong, right?
Oh, that's a bit.
I know it's a bit hyperbolic. I know it's hyperbolic, but I think. And I'm not trying to like make light of kind of like sexual violence in marriage and whatever. But what I am trying to illustrate is the dynamics between Hong Kong and China.
Yeah.
In the case that when China needed us, they were nice to us. As soon as they got rich, they're like, oh fuck it. So political freedoms are an optional extra. So let's get rid of that. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I just think there's fundamentally like between Hong Kong culture and Chinese culture, there's such a massive gap. Like we do not like for example like as and even to the extent like we don't really resonate with local Hong Kong culture that as well. Like obviously we can relate to it more,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if we compare it to like mainland Chinese culture we see on like international campuses, we don't really resonate with that stuff. Like
No.
especially like us from Hong Kong, we don't really resonate with
Like yeah.
when they talk in Mandarin. It's like it's almost as if like I'm talking to like the people who are like oppressing me
Yeah.
to a certain extent.
It's weird. It's weird because Hong Kong students and mainland students almost never mingle outside of China, right?
I mean, unless these Hong Kong people like they have a certain opinion.
Yeah, they have a certain opinion. In which case,
And
yeah,
usually they don't really care because they're rich because of China.
yeah, but it's just different, man. Like,
Yeah.
I
I find that also people who speak out more like us are like more like middle class, like
middle class educated,
high middle class,
yeah.
like educated. Whereas the people who don't really care are the people who are more well off, like
very rich, very rich. So
and their money are super dependent on the fact that China supports them.
So if their father or their mother is like a Chinese oligarch and they've made billions just
They're not going to talk shit about
from
it.
China.
Yeah.
No, they're going to be really supportive of China. Whereas like middle class and lower middle class, like more ordinary people would be more in favor of.
Like for me, you can see people like who have like there's a reason why Chinese people support this government.
Yeah, because the Chinese government made them rich and made them powerful.
Over a course of 2 or 3 decades, they've made them extremely wealthy. If you compare 1980s China to now, like it is a stark difference to like infrastructure, like building like houses for people, right? They have moved so many communities from west of China and build them like amazing like mansions of places to live in, right? And who would kind of like say no to that?
Yeah, and look, the people who like the Communist Party have a point, right? They built up China from basically a third world backwater into a superpower.
Exactly.
And that is something which we can all agree is really impressive.
But it comes with
at a cost.
It comes at a human cost, and that's what people don't see. They just see miracle economic growth.
You know what this reminds me of? Another literature reference. You know Faustus, of Goethe. So Dr. Faustus, he makes a deal with. So Dr. Faustus, he wants to be successful and rich and powerful. So he makes a deal with the devil. So you have like 20 or 30 years of like perfect success.
Yeah.
But then at the end, his spirit goes, with the devil, with his divinity.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what the elites of Hong Kong have made. So they were like, we want to be rich, we want to be powerful, we want to want for nothing. And they got that, right? Hong Kong's rich, and all those property oligarchs who control.
Like before 1997, I felt like at least, I can't really say because I never lived in that time, but Hong Kong was rich because of, like look, Hong Kong was rich because we had a very good financial sector. We worked really hard to build everything from the ground up. Honestly, all of our parents worked extremely hard.
And our grandparents, especially our grandparents.
My grandparents worked extremely hard. Like my parents worked as a company and a company, they built their own company and everything here. They worked extremely hard and honestly, right?
Honestly.
I'm pretty sure most true Hong Kongers built their company honestly. And it's only the people who have kind of subsided with the devil that have become massively rich. And I think that's...
not all of them, but a lot of them.
Not all of them, but a lot of them have.
And the deal they've made is that they've sacrificed what makes Hong Kong Hong Kong.
Exactly, like filmmakers. They move to China because they have more money. They have a bigger budget and they shoot there. Even our I'm not going to shout this out, but NYU's chairman, NYU's Hong Kong Alumni Association chairman, is also a very big China supporter, right? And
I mean, people follow the money. I think that's just
and recently, I was on an internship with BSD. I was shooting one of their interviews, and I was shooting their daughter.
Your what?
I was filming an interview.
Okay.
Because it was basically about like how you like technology and stuff, and we were doing a film with we're filming an interview of their daughter, right? And we went to the house and shot it. Um, and basically, when you look at his background on LinkedIn, it's just helping Asian companies kind of rise from helping these Asian companies to become better, finding these small Asian countries, giving them investment, Chinese investment, and also helping with the Greater Bay Area project, and you realize that like these people like a lot of these rich people are really like supporting of China, right?
I mean, China gives them money.
Exactly, you can see that in terms of like where people live. Like if you guys live south, like in like Hong Kong Island, and you really
The
like
peak.
the peak, Hong Kong Island mid levels,
Causeway Bay.
all that, Causeway Bay, right? I mean, not all,
Causeway Bay is some poor area.
Causeway there's some poor areas like Wan Chai, no, not Wan Chai,
Stop dissing Wan Chai.
but like you know like the rich area like South Horizon and stuff like that. Like you know like
You know where they live.
you know where they live, like most of them. Right?
And not just the rich Chinese people, expats as well usually really like China.
Yeah,
For
like
reasons.
like some people are just like, you know what, fuck it, like so like support the change. I'm like, this is not a good change, and you know morally it's not a good change, but you just don't care because
I don't care
it's
because
giving you money. And it's similar to the situation we like the argument we were having in the last podcast where we were talking about like LeBron James. Like until it affects your wage packet, you're not gonna say shit because it comes at no cost, right? And you know like I'm not gonna diss people who are just like doing it for the money.
No, I mean we understand that people need money. Like that's why we're all hypocritical to some extent.
Exactly.
But sometimes what people do to make money or gain clout is so ridiculous, and you just look at them and you think, you know, are you really a Hong Konger? Like, have you ever cared about this place at all?
Yeah.
Or
if like for me, it's like if you really care about the kind of cultural kind of like the cultural retention
cultural retention
like of Hong Kong, then you should really like think about if you're rich and like you're well off, right? You should really think about your choices, right? Like you shouldn't just like go ahead and like agree with everything China says. You should have your own mind. You should have your own like thoughts, you know.
But
and for most Hong Kongers, it's inevitable that you come to the issue like I've applied for a ton of jobs and a lot of them are swaying towards China, and you know like deep down it doesn't work for you.
But I do understand the kind of pro-Chinese argument as well, because I was talking to a kind of friend of mine. He's like kind of a very big name in finance and stuff. I'm not going to say who it is, but he told me over lunch, and he said, "Look, okay, China has problems, right? Human rights, we've got problems, but so does the rest of the world. So why not enjoy the ride? Why not work with other people, and kind of let's make money together. Let's work well together." And so from their perspective, it makes sense, right? To them, America is just as bad as China, because for sure, like because the American
fuck tons of like friends that I know, right? They're all like, oh, America is as bad as America's bad. If not worse.
Yeah.
If not worse, like look at the situation like of America in Iraq and Kuwait and stuff like they're trying to
they're just as bad.
They're trying to impose their superpower on the rest of the world. Same as China. China's doing the same thing. What's wrong with doing that?
People equate America and China and say, oh, they're both just as bad, so I might as well go with the one that makes me money and, you know, it's chill. Everyone's evil. Everyone does bad shit to survive. Yeah. I might as well join the
But there's fundamentally something wrong with that. I think, I wouldn't say America is that.
I don't think America is in the same league as China. No, America is so far from being perfect and so far from...
It is not perfect whatsoever. It's not.
But America or China? I mean, I think I know my personal answer to that question, right? Yeah. Because China, the problem...
Why do Chinese students move to America all the time?
Why do Chinese politicians move all of their money to America? That's the question I want. Xi Jinping's daughter went to Harvard, unless I'm forgetting something. It just goes to show that the Chinese, even as they are pillaging their own resources and exploiting their own countrymen, they're moving all of their resources abroad because they know fundamentals. Like, people vote with their feet, right? People chat a lot of shit. They're like, oh, China's really great. We made China great. But at the end of the day, they're moving away. They're going to Hong Kong, or at least they used to. And now that Hong Kong is disappearing, they're going to Singapore, they're going to the West. Why?
And the people who are rich don't give a shit. Like they don't care. Like they don't care about the people who have to stay behind, and they don't care about the people who, like the poor who have zero level of mobilization, right? Zero capabilities of mobilization.
I don't think the super rich, I don't think they understand Hong Kong culture as well as ordinary people.
Sorry about that. Camera cut at 30 minutes, so we're gonna just keep going.
Yeah, so some super rich people are good, but a lot of them are
like, in my opinion, a lot of them are kind of deluded with the idea that like they're kind of in a bubble.
I wouldn't say that. In a bubble.
Well, not deluded, but in a bubble where they just don't know what's happening with the rest of the world, or like they don't understand.
Or even their own city, they don't know what's happening in their neighborhood.
They don't value certain things. They don't understand like how privileged they are, and
I mean we are privileged as well.
But we acknowledge our privilege, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not going to go out and just spend like.
We're not going to say because I've heard this argument before, right?
Yeah.
We were at this really fancy annual dinner.
Yeah.
You know Regina Ip, the pro-establishment politician.
Oh my god.
She was the keynote speaker, and she was like, all the protesters, they're not like you. You guys are good. You get good grades. You've got a bright future. But all of those rioters on the street, they're just poor dumb kids. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, woman? Like,
dude,
does she
I wish
does she know?
Genuinely, I wish you at that speech were like, I fucking protested. I'm not gonna write you out right now, but like I fucking
peaceful legal protest.
Like I peacefully protested on that street, right? And
but yeah,
in demands of this right, so you cannot call me a poor protester.
And even for the more radical protesters who did break the law, right?
Like this shouldn't be a classist argument.
No,
nothing. This should never be a classist argument.
There are peaceful protesters who stayed within the law, like you and me. So we only went to we were the quiet.
I've only been like one or two protests.
Yeah. I've been to like a few more, but to the people out there, a lot of the rich people say, oh, those people are in Cantonese 搞亂檔, so like making a mess out of everything.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's true. I think a lot of them are misguided, true, but many more of them truly love the space. You can tell.
Like I will say that I demonize violent protests. Like I don't think that is a good.
Not demonize, but like you're opposed to it.
I am opposed to it.
I don't think it's effective.
Like I don't think it's an effective way. Like for me, like peaceful protesting is okay. Like even with BLM, like there's a creation of there's this argument in the comparison between BLM that the Chinese are making between BLM and the Hong Kong protests and calling them similar, if not the same, kind of like
they're all rioters.
Oh, rioters, bunch of
burning shops,
bunch of
ruining
twats,
people's lives,
yeah.
breaking the law.
Yeah.
But they don't see the situation in Hong Kong like we do. What we see every day.
But but see the thing is right. I do stand up. Like I do see systematic like racism in America.
It is absolutely a problem.
A fact that systematic racism exists in America.
But I would argue that the protests in America have gone out of hand, maybe. But so have the police.
I will say like okay, I agree with like peaceful protesting in America. I just think at the same time you have to have some level of like
radical action.
No, not radical action. Like institutional change. Like education, for example, is really important in America. Whereas the case with Hong Kong, it's a bit like
there is no institutional change because the institution is China.
It's completely fucked.
And that's why the argument from the more violent protesters.
I will say this about America, right? Just to play devil's advocate for a little bit. Because I wouldn't say like the institution in America is changeable, but right now it is not. It's tough. It's disarray. It's hard for you to just push the argument to two white men who don't really know what they're doing. Let's be honest, who don't have a plan for the country, to promote removing racism and equality. Right, it's difficult for them.
No, I agree.
But I will say, in terms of Hong Kong, it is impossible for us to have even the ability to change, or every 4 years to be able to have a new president come in and have their new fresh ideas, because we don't get to vote.
Yeah.
What do we get to vote for?
We get to vote for
council.
District council.
Council.
So who organizes the rubbish bin collecting?
Exactly.
Right. And even that we really value, we really treasure.
The reason why we protested in 2014 is because we wanted to not
Universal
vote for
suffrage.
Universal suffrage. We wanted true universal suffrage. We didn't want to vote for there was an apple or an orange, and we didn't want to pick either one of them, right? Which is right now what's happening in America because you're basically picking between
No, but
an orange and an apple.
But we didn't even get to pick. So,
we didn't get to pick.
So
it's everything on one of them is screen. It's like
so. China was like, you can either have an apple or an orange, and hang on, you're not allowed to choose. We just choose for you.
Yeah, exactly. It just doesn't really fucking matter, right? But at least in America, every 4 years, understand that in America, at least you get to pick every 4 years. There's going to be a new guy who comes in, or two new guys who comes in, and be like, oh wow, I'm going to come in with new ideas, and someone that and obviously this is somewhat of a soap opera in terms of like debate and everything, but at least you get to vote for the person you like more, and you know that they're coming from two completely different parties and completely different backgrounds, and then two completely not radically different, but like different points of view.
Ignoring the politics, though, another advantage which America has is the system of checks and balances, because you've got something called the Constitution, which like Trump can't just say, "Oh, I don't care about the Fourth Amendment. I'm just going to search everyone's house." He can't do that.
Yeah, he can't do the Article 40. He can't do the Article 48 of Hitler's reign and be like, "Yo, I'm going to be president," and act a bunch of what was it called again?
Like
dictatorship laws, chancellor takes over the president, blah blah blah.
But
he can't do that.
So in America, you've got this not a perfect system, but a pretty workable system of the judiciary, the president, and the executive, and the kind of the Congress, and they balance each other out. Whereas in China, it's Xi Jinping, Xi Jinping, Xi Jinping.
We love you, Xi Jinping.
Yeah, we love you.
We love you, Xi Jinping. We don't hate you. We love you so much. Our podcast is fully supportive. Fully supportive of your cause.
And we would like to invite all our mainland colleagues to vote for the Communist Party if there is an election.
I feel like it's a bit like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the sense where like Democratic North Korea.
I mean, it's very democratic, right?
It's so democratic.
There's so many
only
people.
One person you can vote for, and that's Kim Jong-un. Okay?
But I think the political kind of inertia in Hong Kong contributes to its declining culture, because we don't have the power to control our own fate, and therefore what makes us special we're no longer able to protect.
Yeah, no, exactly. So for me...
But it's so hard to define what Hong Kong culture is. We can only really say what it's not. But you
have to kind of live it.
You have to live in Hong Kong. Not just for... Like, a lot of white people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, I went to Hong Kong for 2 weeks. It was so good."
Like, you can't really define it. Like, you can't define
like that's not enough.
It's not as simple as like, oh, English culture, Welsh culture,
exactly.
Scottish culture, and Irish culture. Like, they have clear traditions and stuff. Like, we have similar traditions to everyone else, but it's also different in terms of the way we act, our behavior.
I'm not saying we're better. We're just different.
We're just different, exactly. Like our behavior.
We're wired differently.
Like towards certain things, like we don't like what are some things that we're different to in comparison to like mainland people?
I mean, I think we value kind of freedom of speech a lot more in terms of like, actually, no, sir, like I disagree. Like, I think we're much more willing to do that.
At schools, in terms of an educational level, like coming from an international school, especially, like we can raise our hand, you can talk smack against the professor, but
also in local schools, not just national,
and even local schools as well. But in China, if you oppose what, like the status quo, and the people what they say, it's almost like you're digging against. They think disagreement is almost like ill discipline.
Right? For the mainland Chinese, disagreement is disloyalty.
Exactly.
Whereas in Hong Kong, disagreement just means we can sort it out.
And it's kind of like it's a stepping stone to understanding, to have a more of a holistic view on a topic. And as much as we can't, and as much as we agree with having a holistic approach, we can't just demonize like other people, like how they've grown up to be. Like
for a lot of mainland Chinese, the Chinese system works, and we're like, more power to you.
I can't blame Chinese people for how they feel, because
exactly, like you have a right to how you feel and your opinion.
Yeah.
But you need to ask yourself, is it right for my government to be doing this to minorities? Is it right for my government to be forcing what I like on people who don't like what I like.
Exactly. Like for me, it's like people in positions of power, just like mainland Chinese people,
Yeah.
should always help people who are in a kind of less privileged position, right? And you know, people like us, people like
Oh, we're not that.
I mean, not us, but
we're
like
pretty
we're pretty
but-
privileged. But I'm saying like ethnically,
yeah, yeah.
and in terms of an ethnic level, they should try to help us be like if you really want. Okay, not saying I would want this to happen, but there's an increasing divide between mainlanders and Hong Kongers because of the fact that there is this like culture gap.
Political and cultural
And there is
pressure.
there's no willingness to kind of compromise one, and there's no willingness to kind of see our differences and understand both our differences and have a holistic approach like towards kind of fixing these issues, right? I feel like because of that there is no like it's just like, oh, we're standing by a fence and we're just looking over and like, oh, I fucking hate you and you hate me. We're trying to always kind of compare each other, and there is no idea of like, oh, we're on the same like kind of team here, guys. And as much as that pains me to say we're on the same team, it is true, we are on kind of the same team.
Look, we depend on each other.
Exactly, we
to
depend
do
on
well.
each other.
But I guess what we're trying to say is that, look, we're not trying to blow up Communist Party headquarters, right? All we're asking is just leave us the fuck alone. We don't want to overthrow you. We don't want to kill all of your leaders. We just want to have what we're entitled to, a democratic way of life, an independent judiciary.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's like China does not accept that because of the fact that like it goes completely against what they.
As
their
I said,
values are.
disagreement means disloyalty. Oh, you like democracy? That means you want. That means you support all the terrorists.
That's why you see. That's why you see China really gunning for Taiwan right now because they're an example of what true democracy can do.
Taiwan was what China could have been.
Exactly.
And still could be.
But to be honest, I don't think if the Kuomintang went into
the Kuomintang were corrupt as fuck.
exactly. That's
even now, the Kuomintang.
That was the point I was going to raise. Like, if the Kuomintang go into China, either way, we're trying to fuck either way, in my opinion.
I do massively respect Taiwan though, because they show that you can have Chinese culture existing with democracy plus an effective governance. Like, look at how Taiwan did during COVID, right? So in mainland China, they were like, 0 civil liberties, we're going to shut everything down, censor information. Taiwan, they didn't do any of that. But they were still Chinese, right? They were still Chinese
but
culture.
the thing was, like, they sent, I remember one of the officials, they sent 2 scouts to mainland China to examine the situation in November. And the thing was, they came back, it was like, oh my god, there's a virus that is happening there. They shut everything down early. Like, in December, they shut everything down, even before they knew it was a global epidemic or pandemic, right? And you know, the Chinese were extremely slow on reporting this news. By the way, this does not give any leeway for Donald Trump.
Yeah, but we're not saying because China was bad, Trump was good. We're saying China was really bad and Trump is also really incompetent.
He's also really incompetent in defending his own country against this virus.
Yeah.
Like yes, if okay, for example, for me, right? If you are New Zealand, you can throw shots at China all you want because what you did was correct. You defended against COVID. You did what you had to do as a country.
You pulled through.
You showed resilience.
Responsibility.
You showed resilience as a country. You also made policies and measures that actually worked, right? So now you can throw shots at China all you want, right? Because you don't have a scapegoat. You don't you can throw shots at China as much as you want because they're the cause of the reason, and you did all you can to defend it, and now you really can talk smack.
Yeah.
Right.
But
I don't think America can talk smack.
I think it does annoy me about Americans actually, because on one hand they're like, China caused all of this, and on the other hand they said it's a hoax. So pick one.
Dude, okay. The thing about it is, right, American culture is a little bit fried when it comes to like obeying the law, right? And this is partly down to the fact that it's such an influx of cultures. And I will say this, right? Canadians feel more Canadian than Americans feel more American. Can we agree on that?
I don't know that much actually.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't go as far to say that.
I wouldn't go as far as to say, but I will make that statement because I feel like on one hand, like Americans have so many different cultures, but yet they're so all of them are so marginalized.
I think it's more due to the fact that America was founded as a nation of rebels, because that's how they got their start, right? They rebelled against the British.
Yeah.
So it's in their DNA to have disobeyed the law, and I kind of respect that because that's what helped America become so strong and so free over the last 100 years. What I don't like is the fact that they're using this idea of personal freedom, both like an idea which you and I really support, right? But they use this idea to say, "Oh, we don't need to wear masks." And here's one comparison which I like to.
Like this rebel mentality is all over their news, their pop culture, everything. Like it's just like, why is America the only country that doesn't refuses to wear a mask? And it's a political issue, not
Well, not the only, but the big country. The
where,
glaring
where
exception.
wearing masks is like a political issue, rather than like it's a global pandemic, guys. Please just wear a mask. Like, please wear a mask.
Here's what I say to my conservative friends, right? Because I identify as like libertarian / conservative, so
Yeah.
I'm not against the Republican Party by any stretch of imagination. But here's what I say, because a lot of them support guns, right? So I'm like, okay, so at the gun range, do you like scope your rifle over people and act like an idiot? No, you make sure it's pointed down range, and when you stop shooting, you point it at the floor so that it's safe.
Mhm.
Same idea with the mask. It's not about personal freedom. Like, even the most diehard Republican will admit that at the range, they don't have the personal freedom to swing their guns around, right? They need to obey gun safety. It's just the same. It's the same as gun safety. Like, wearing a mask is the same as making sure, you know, your gun is cleared, that there are no more bullets in the firing chamber, that you've unloaded it and everything. That's how I try to explain it to my conservative friends.
For sure. So, so it's not really a choice. It's you have to do it.
It's just, you should do it, man. Like,
For the safety of other people, you should do it, and that's why I feel like, and that's why I feel like countries like Japan, New Zealand, and countries that have a really strong sense of unity, really pulled through in this pandemic.
Hong Kong, right? Because
in this pandemic, right?
Because the Hong Kong government said, "Oh, it doesn't matter if China's COVID. We're still going to let Chinese tourists in." Like, a lot of Westerners, they look at Hong Kong and think, "Oh, the Hong Kong government must be doing such a great job."
Like,
no,
it's
the Hong Kong people.
Exactly. It's
the
Hong Kong people who
people.
have respect for other people and the people around them that has led to this, right? The moment there's 100 cases, boom, we shut down everything.
Shut down.
Everyone stays at home. No one goes to work. We're gonna obey the laws until this like subsides.
And
right?
like ordinary business owners, they weren't saying, "Oh, I'm going to like protest and do all of this crazy stuff." They say, "Look, it's really difficult for us and we're hurting really badly. But
the
we're gonna protect
well-being of the
society."
people, exactly, right?
And I don't think a lot of, and then you know what I really hate? When Westerners say, "Oh, it's because Chinese people have this Confucian culture." It has nothing to do with Confucius. It's just common sense, and just, you don't want to get sick. You don't want your parents to get sick. It has nothing to do with Confucius or Chinese Neo-Confucian philosophy.
We're in a pandemic, guys. Just please accept the fact that
just use
we
common
need
sense.
to pull this together.
Yeah.
As a community, we have to pull this together. We pull it together.
And I'm not, because I know the left wing as well have been going crazy, because the left wing say, "Oh, shut everything down, always stay at home, be fearful," and at the same time they don't have a perfect solution either, because you know what the conservatives do have correctly is they say that you should go outside and you should get more vitamin D because that helps you against COVID. Like, that's not wrong.
What do you
either.
say to the people, like, the argument that in America there's people who have, like, more, like, if they don't go out, they'll have PTSD and all these different issues and stuff like that, and like, and if they and you know it's more important than the pandemic, you know, like it'll kill more people,
like psychologically.
Psychologically, exactly.
Okay, I'm not denying that there are some people who suffer from depression or anxiety.
Because that's the argument some Trump supporters I talked to have brought up.
And look, there are some people who desperately need social connection. Those people do need to talk to other people, otherwise they will go into a mental state which is extremely unhealthy. And of course, staying at home all the time is going to be bad for your mental health, right?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
But for the majority of people, you don't suffer from depression or anxiety. And so, my advice to normal people who, like, I don't want to say normal people because people who are mentally ill are also normal, they're just suffering from an illness. But people who don't suffer from mental illness, like two words, like man up. Like it's Blaise Pascal, the great French philosopher, said all of mankind's problems stems from the fact that people are unable to just spend time by themselves in their room, and I think that's what's happening. I think yes, mental health. It's very important that we track our mental health, that we stay connected, but does that mean you can go to a beach on Florida and like have like
spring break?
There's a difference between, keeping in touch with like your church or your congregation or your friends or your family, and you can do that. You've got households.
And there's a difference between making out with random strangers on a beach that you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, people who think that they will die or they will get depression if they can't go on spring break with their friends and have sex with strangers. Like, I'm sorry, like you need to make sacrifices for your country. You just
think about the people like in World War One, World War Two. They went out as youngsters, as 18, 19-year-olds, volunteered to go to war as a patriot of their own country, and that is the reason why they decided to go.
Your grandfathers,
they sacrificed their bodies.
They sacrificed everything, nearly.
And everything, their limbs and shit, for you to be able to go out and fuck random strangers.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of depressing?
And it's just it's an easier challenge as well. Your great-grandfather fought in the trenches of World War One, facing that machine gun fire from the Germans, and he's suffering from trench foot and everything. So that's what he had to do to protect his country. Or you need to do to protect your country.
You stay at home.
Or you don't even need to stay at home. Just wear a mask, wash your hands, and check your temperature. It's not that difficult. Nobody's asking you to die in a trench in Flanders. What we're just asking you to do is just use a bit of common sense. Think about your family. Think about your friends.
Think about the old people. Think about the people who can't really...
Think about your grandma, man. Like, she's looked after you your whole life, and you've decided that your right to party is more important than her staying alive. I mean...
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
But I will say that about countries that are pulling through together. If you look at countries like... I feel like I can put them into categories, right? America is one of those countries that...
Sweden. Wait, I've got stats here. Let me look. Because people always talk about Sweden, right?
Sweden is an open... There's a big debate because it's such an open place. Like, they didn't close their borders. They didn't go shut down.
A lot of people cherry pick data from Sweden to say, oh, look at Sweden, nothing happened and it's all good. Or actually, bro, Sweden has 56.4 deaths per 100,000, and that makes it 5th in the world. They're ahead of the United States, right? The United States have, if I look at it here, so the United States have 47.9 deaths per 100,000.
Yeah.
And they're 8th highest in the world. America's 8th highest in the world in terms of death per capita. Sweden has 56.4 deaths per 100,000 population, which makes it 5th in the world. And then, worst of all, you've got the United Kingdom, 69.6 out of 100,000. And that's 2nd highest in the world. Top is Belgium. So Sweden is not a good example to use. I mean, okay, the death rates are kind of low, but adjusted for population, it's going berserk.
Yeah. My thing is like countries that... Well, yeah, I agree with you what you're saying. It's just like countries that don't have a sense of harmoniousness or like identity.
I don't want to say harmoniousness because the Western people will say, Confucius, Chinese culture.
Like they don't have a sense of identity. Like for example, Canadians pull through, very much so, and they're not racially homogenous. Like Trudeau is an avid supporter of bringing Syrian refugees. Like, it's just that he made people feel more included in the conversation, right? And that's what
I don't know if it's down to Trudeau.
And I'm not gonna say like Trudeau's a perfect president. What I'm saying is that
I'm not a big fan of Trudeau.
But what I'm saying is that he's included people. It's just like Obama, like before. And I'm not saying Obama and Trudeau are not perfect presidents, right? What I've done racially is included all these people, and made them feel part of a conversation.
I don't think race is that important, to be honest. I just think it's willingness to rely on common sense, which is why I would put New Zealand and Taiwan are the two standouts. South Korea would be a standout if not for that crazy Christian cult which went out infecting everyone.
Yeah, they had like 1,000 something cases.
Yeah, but that's not because the Koreans sucked. It was because there was this fundamentalist religious sect.
But when you but okay, we can say all these countries are great at controlling the coronavirus, but when you compare it to like countries like India. Okay, India, The reason why India have high corona cases right now, and a lot of Indians can't fly back to Hong Kong, is simply because they're poor, low infrastructure, and blatantly, to be honest, even Africa and countries.
Africa's not a country, mate.
Countries inside. I don't want to be American, but countries in Africa or countries in South America are really not pulling through. Like, don't laugh at me like that. Fucking hell, Jesus Christ, mate. Nah, bro.
I mean, okay.
Countries. Okay, let me rephrase. Countries in Africa. But India, like people in India, like live in such confined spaces that is almost unavoidable.
I think it's infrastructure. A lot of it is infrastructure,
Exactly.
like sewage systems and stuff. A lot of people also say that China's done a really good job. True, but you need to look at China.
Do you
and
really
say,
trust that it's 80,000 people?
Firstly, do you trust their numbers? And you can say, yeah, the Communist Party has never lied to us before. They're so
we saw a
trustworthy.
party in Wuhan, and therefore it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But has China dealt with it better than the United States in terms of controlling it? In terms of numbers, yes. But how come this virus, which originated in China, was covered up for so long? How come China asked the WHO to give wrong advice? Wrong advice, right?
Yeah.
Even, I remember in February or something, like Dr. Tedros, like the Chinese puppet in the WHO, he said, oh yeah, you don't need to wear masks. You can still travel.
That's not airborne and everything, yeah.
Because he's in the Chinese pocket. And China, yes, they did well, but at what cost? Like, they screwed over the rest of the world.
It really exposed China's institutional problems in terms of, like, not having free speech and what happens when someone comes up with something that goes against social harmony.
Dr. Li Wenliang, who spoke out, he was a whistleblower, and he said China has a pandemic. China arrested him for basically like causing social disorder. And that's why
bringing back to the point about Hong Kong culture, that's why people in Hong Kong really respect the fact that we have freedom of speech, because like people of whatever caliber, of whatever level, of whatever social class, of whatever educational level can still have a say.
Exactly.
And have an opinion on something. Whereas in China, the older you are, the wiser you are.
Or the more power you have.
The more power you have.
Or the richer you are.
And the richer, and so forth, we should listen to you more. And this idea that, like, oh, because of your status, and even India with castes and stuff, like
yeah, the caste
system, like it's bullshit. Like, we're all humans, and like underneath us, it's artificial barriers.
I mean, there are natural differences between everyone. Like you're bigger than me, for example, or I might.
But
be
to be honest,
at some things.
I'll say this: being bigger is just training.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is that there are natural differences. So some people have higher IQs, some people have lower IQs, but that doesn't mean you have low moral worth. And to a lot of Americans, but also a lot of just Westerners who talk about safe spaces and woke culture, look, freedom of speech means that there are going to be dumb people chatting dumb shit. And some of that shit is going to be really, really offensive
and annoying,
right? Like they.
And that's my thing. Like, that's a source of the woke culture. The fact that there are a bunch of annoying people,
annoying racist
cunts who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And then they just like bring up all these different things, and they're just so freaking tired of it that they're just, oh, you know what? Let's just have this woke culture that would exist, and then completely defeats the purpose of freedom of speech.
But you look, freedom of speech means, and society needs dumb people, because if dumb people don't speak out, how will we know? How can we unroot all these dumb ideas and refute them and improve them?
Exactly.
You need offensive dumb people for society to work.
Nigel Farage.
But yeah, we really dislike woke culture, and woke culture takes a different form in China, because it's not about avoiding offense. Like, it's not about protecting transgender people or homosexual people or whatever. In China, woke culture or political correctness is about protecting the system, protecting the people who have power,
and protecting the money at the top.
And that's why you always need freedom of speech, I think, if the one takeaway.
Yeah, if the one takeaway of this entire podcast to include
Hong Kong culture, so Hong Kong culture, I would say, is a mix of China, of British influences, and arguably even of American influences. So all of that came to Hong Kong in a big mix. And we added things like an independent judiciary, freedom of speech, slightly different language patterns. And then because we're separated from China so long, we had our own cultural patterns. It's hard for outsiders to understand, and even white people who have lived in Hong Kong for 20, 30 years, some of them still don't get it because they're still in their own little kind of... Yeah, so I was saying, these Westerners, to fully understand Hong Kong from an outsider's perspective, you need to spend years talking to locals, learning the language.
Understanding the people. Yeah.
It's not good enough to say, I've been to Hong Kong for 2 weeks, I had like tofu pudding, it's all chill. No. It's not enough.
It's not exactly. You have to really have to feel it, you have to live it.
You have to 5 years minimum. And I don't mean 5 years of just living in Hong Kong. I mean 5 years of interacting.
To be honest, that's every culture.
Every culture.
But and you can't just say it's Hong Kong because it's like, oh, we just live in Hong Kong, but whatever. But it's every culture. In order to fully understand it, you have to bathe in it. There's a French saying, I don't remember what it was, but like you have to bathe in the culture, bathe in the language in order to really fully understand their ways of living and everything, right? I'm not saying
Je me lave dans la culture.
Okay, I'm not saying like I'm a French like I know everything about French culture. It's just like that was the first piece of advice that was given to me when I was first exposed to French culture. Like bathe in it, live in it.
Same for England, same for America.
Exactly.
But for people who don't understand,
and especially for Americans, I feel like that's something that they're missing a little bit.
Not just Americans. I think Europeans, British.
Yeah.
They all have, because
it's all centric. Like
they are the
really
West. They are the West.
The West, like.
And I don't. When I say when I say people are like Western centric, I don't mean it in the way that politically correct people mean it. Because politically correct is say, oh, you're Anglo-centric because you're ignoring like post-colonial discourses and all that bullshit, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about that. We're just saying you just need to get out of your skin, like and get in and just learn
learn about other people's like plights and like cultures and everything.
Just in case anyone viewing this podcast is having like doubts about what we believe politically, like fuck that kind of post-structuralist, post-colonial, like neo-Marxist like discourses. Have you heard about that on like NYU?
I'm not too sure.
Yeah, but all of that, I at least I think it's rubbish. But it is a fact that everyone will be blind to a certain extent. When we go to the West, we're blind to some of its aspects.
But it's the effort that counts.
Yeah,
like the effort in trying to adopt different cultures, understand different cultures, and have a holistic view on different cultures.
Oh, my favorite one is the Westerner with an Asian wife. Oh, I have an Asian wife, and they look so proud.
And therefore, I am.
I'm now an expert sinologist because I have an Asian wife.
Thing is, right? You reverse that, and you have an Asian guy and a white wife. That shit doesn't like.
That shit doesn't fly.
That shit doesn't fly at all. Doesn't fly at all.
I mean, it's so funny watching all these expats if they're like Asian wives. Oh yeah, my wife is Asian, and they always want to include that, and then it's just so funny.
My wife is colored, black, whatever. Yeah, cool. Like I know everything about BLM. Don't lecture me. Ridiculous, honestly.
But yeah, Hong Kong culture. I mean, we can go on for hours, but I think as a kind of
we've gone on for an hour.
Yeah, but it's definitely something worth looking into, especially if you want to learn about how a democratic society can be turned due to just size and influence.
Yeah.
And you can, for people wondering how dictatorships come about in a gradual way. I'm not talking about like a coup d'etat where overnight it's a dictatorship. I'm talking about a gradual shift. If you want a case study for a gradual backsliding from freedom and democracy into dictatorship and tyranny, look at Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a warning for everyone else in the world.
For sure, yeah, 100%.
I think that's a wrap. Yeah, all right.
Thanks for listening to the second episode of the podcast. I hope you guys enjoy it. It was really fun talking, honestly. Yeah. We actually talked way above time.
Enjoyed it too much.
But yeah, if you guys like the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell button below if you guys want to have more notifications and everything. We really enjoy talking about this stuff, so it would be really great if you could support us. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys, and more content coming out soon. Peace.